Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. My name is Larry. For most of my adult life, I worked as a commercial electrician. Before that, I spent 6 years in the Marines. I wasn't the kind of man who sat around complaining about life. If something broke, I fixed it. If there was a problem, I dealt with it. That was how I approached my marriage to Kate. We had been married for 8 years. We owned a house outside Indianapolis. No kids. We both had good careers. From the outside, it looked like a normal life. Kate managed restaurant openings for a hospitality company. She traveled more than I did and knew everybody in the business. About a year before our divorce, she started talking about a consultant named Ryan Foster. At first, it was harmless. Ryan helped save that project in Cincinnati. Ryan convinced the owner to change the whole floor plan. Ryan is one of the smartest people I've worked with. I didn't think much about it. Then I started hearing his name every day. At dinner, in the car, watching television. Ryan this, Ryan that. One night, I finally looked up from my plate. Does this guy ever stop talking? Kate laughed. What? You mention him more than your own family. She rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. Maybe I should have paid more attention then. A few months later, the work dinners started. Kate would leave the house around 6 and come home after 10, sometimes 11. Always the same explanation. Client dinner. Vendor meeting. Opening strategy. I never checked her phone, never followed her, never played detective. But I paid attention. One Thursday evening, she walked into the kitchen while I was cleaning up after work. Another dinner tonight, she said. With who? A few people from the company. I nodded. Then she grabbed her purse a little too quickly. Don't wait up. That answer bothered me. Not because of what she said, because of how fast she said it. I watched her drive away. Then I checked the restaurant she had mentioned earlier that week, a place downtown called Hawthorne Grill. I looked at the clock. 6:42. Then I grabbed my truck keys. If everything was innocent, I'd have dinner and drive home. If it wasn't, I'd find out tonight. Either way, I wasn't interested in guessing anymore. I parked across the street from Hawthorne Grill and sat in my truck for about 10 seconds. Not because I was nervous, because once I walked in, there was no going back. The place was busy. Thursday night crowd. Couples, business meetings, families. I stepped inside and scanned the room. It took me less than 5 seconds to find Kate. She wasn't sitting with a group. She wasn't sitting with clients. She was sitting alone in a corner booth with Ryan Foster. I recognized him immediately from pictures on her company website. Expensive watch. Perfect haircut. The kind of guy who spent more time looking successful than being successful. What caught my attention wasn't him. It was Kate. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Ryan leaned forward and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. That was enough for me. I walked straight across the restaurant. Kate looked up first. The color drained from her face. Larry? Ryan turned around. His smile disappeared. I stopped beside the table. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Kate stood up. This isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. Really? Ryan cleared his throat. Look, man. I cut him off immediately. Don't. The word came out flat and hard. He shut his mouth. I looked directly at Kate. You told me this was a company dinner. It is. No. I pointed at the empty seats around the table. This is a date. A few nearby customers had started paying attention. Kate lowered her voice. Can we talk outside? We can talk right here. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Kate looked furious now. You don't trust me? I stared at her for a second. Then I nodded toward Ryan. You brought another man to dinner and you're asking me about trust? Neither of them had an answer. That told me everything. I reached into my pocket and placed my wedding ring on the table. Kate's eyes widened. Larry, don't do this. I'm not doing anything. I looked at Ryan, then back at her. You already did. I turned and walked away. Kate called my name before I reached the door. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. By the time I got back to my truck, I already knew what my next call would be. Not to my wife, to a lawyer, because some decisions don't need a second meeting. I met with a lawyer the next morning before work. The consultation lasted 25 minutes. I told him the facts. No speeches, no emotional breakdown, just facts. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. So, you're certain? Yes. You want to attempt counseling first? No. He nodded once. That was the end of that discussion. 3 days later, the paperwork was moving. A week after that, Kate finally realized I wasn't bluffing. She came home one evening and found 3 boxes stacked near the front door. My clothes, my documents, my personal tools. Nothing else. She stood there staring at them. "You're seriously doing this?" I looked up from the kitchen table. "I'm already doing it." Kate dropped her purse onto the counter. "You saw one dinner." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed since Hawthorne Grill. "Kate, don't insult my intelligence." Her jaw tightened. "Nothing happened." "Then why lie about it?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different angle. "Ryan understands my career." There it is. What? The real answer. She crossed her arms. "You never supported what I wanted." I stood up. "No!" I pointed toward the driveway. "I worked overtime to help buy this house." Then toward the garage. "I paid for your master's degree." Then back at her. "Don't rewrite history because you found somebody new." For a second, she looked away. That was the closest thing to guilt I'd seen. Then it disappeared. "I deserve to be happy." I nodded. "Then go be happy." The words seemed to catch her off guard. No argument, no pleading, no negotiation. Just agreement. She stared at me. "That's it? What were you expecting?" She didn't answer. Because we both knew. She expected a fight. She expected me to compete. She expected me to chase her. Instead, I picked up one of the boxes. "I'm not competing with another man for my own wife." The room went quiet. Then I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard her voice. "Where are you going?" I opened the door. "A better direction than this." 2 weeks later, I accepted a position with a large electrical contractor in Dallas. A month after that, I was gone. The divorce process continued without me, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward instead of over my shoulder. What I didn't know was that Kate and Ryan were already planning something much bigger and much faster. Dallas turned out to be the best decision I had made in years. The work was steady. The pay was better. The company handled large commercial projects all over Texas, and within a few months I was running crews instead of just working on them. I rented a small house outside Fort Worth, bought a truck, and got back to the kind of routine that had always worked for me. Wake up, work, train, sleep. No drama, no excuses, just progress. My younger sister Emma called me every couple of weeks to check in. Unlike most people, she respected boundaries. She never pushed updates about Kate unless I asked. One evening, about 6 months after I moved, Emma called while I was finishing paperwork. "You busy?" "Depends." "I heard something today." I already knew where the conversation was heading. "Kate?" "Yeah." I leaned back in my chair. "What happened?" There was a short pause. Then Emma laughed. Not because it was funny, because she couldn't believe it. "She and Ryan are getting married." I frowned. "Already?" "The wedding is in 3 months." I glanced at the calendar on my desk. Our divorce had just been finalized a few days earlier, which meant Kate would be remarried only 3 months after the divorce. I wasn't surprised. Honestly, it explained a lot. People don't move that fast unless the relationship started long before the marriage ended. "Good luck to them," I said. Emma was quiet. Then she said something strange. "Actually, that's why I'm calling." "What do you mean?" "My company got hired for the reception." That got my attention. Emma worked for an event rental business. Tables, decorations, lighting setups. Apparently, Ryan and Kate had booked one of the largest venues outside Indianapolis, a renovated estate called Willow Creek Manor. "Can you get out of it?" I asked. "No." "Then just do your job and leave." "That's the plan." I meant it. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't interested in making a scene. That chapter was over, or at least I thought it was. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emma called again. This time she sounded different, less amused, more concerned. "You know that feeling when something doesn't add up?" "What doesn't add up?" She lowered her voice. "I met someone connected to Ryan today." I frowned. "Who?" "A woman named Lauren." I didn't recognize the name, but the way Emma said it told me one thing. Whatever story Lauren had to tell, it wasn't going to help Ryan on his wedding day. The wedding was on a Saturday afternoon. I was in Texas overseeing a warehouse project when Emma called me during her lunch break. The reception hadn't started yet. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "Lauren." I stepped away from the crew and found a quiet spot. "What happened?" Emma took a breath. "I met her again this morning." "And?" "She used to date Ryan." That didn't sound unusual. Then Emma continued. while he was dating someone else. Now I was listening. Lauren apparently worked in restaurant management and had known Ryan for years. According to her, Ryan had a habit of overlapping relationships. Nothing dramatic, just dishonest. He'd tell one woman one story and another woman a completely different one. The problem was that Lauren had proof. Photos, messages, dates, a timeline. Enough to make people uncomfortable. "Is she going to the wedding?" I asked. "She's already here." That surprised me. "As a guest?" +1. I shook my head. "Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen." That's what I'm worried about. Before hanging up, I gave Emma the same advice I'd been giving since the beginning. Stay out of it. That's the plan. Do your job. Come home. She agreed. A few hours later, I was finishing the day when my phone started vibrating. 3 calls from Emma, back to back. Then a 4th. I answered immediately. What happened? For a second, all I heard was noise in the background. Voices, music, people talking. Then Emma finally spoke. "Larry?" The tone in her voice told me everything. Something had gone very wrong. "What happened?" "The speeches." I leaned against my truck. "What about them?" Emma let out a slow breath. "Ryan stood up and started talking about fate." "Of course he did," she continued. "He said some people spend their whole lives searching for the right person. Then he said he knew Kate was the one from the moment they met. I could already see where this was going. Then Emma said the last thing Ryan needed to hear. Lauren stood up. What did she say? Emma actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because she still couldn't believe it. She looked right at Ryan and said, "That's interesting because you told me the exact same thing while you were dating somebody else." I stood there silently. The wedding reception had just become a lot more interesting, and Lauren wasn't finished. According to Emma, the room went silent the second Lauren spoke. Ryan froze. Kate looked confused. Most of the guests had no idea who Lauren was. Ryan recovered first. He forced a smile and said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Lauren didn't sit down. "Actually, there hasn't." Then she pulled out her phone. That was when things started getting ugly. Emma told me later that Lauren wasn't yelling. She wasn't emotional. She was calm, which somehow made it worse. She started laying everything out. Dates, conversations, promises Ryan had made. One detail after another. Not years ago. Not before Kate. During the period when Ryan and Kate claimed they had fallen in love. The room became very uncomfortable. Kate kept looking between them. Then she asked Ryan directly, "Who is she?" Ryan didn't answer fast enough. That was his mistake. Lauren answered for him. "I'm somebody he promised a future to." The best man suddenly became very interested in his drink. A few guests quietly stood up and headed toward the bar. Ryan tried to take control again. "Lauren, this isn't the place." She nodded. "You're right." Then she delivered the line that people would be talking about for weeks afterward. She looked directly at Kate and said, "If he'll leave a relationship to start one with you, eventually he'll leave yours to start one with somebody else." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even from hundreds of miles away, I could picture the look on Kate's face. Emma said she had never seen somebody go pale that quickly. Ryan reached for Kate's hand. She pulled hers away. That told everyone in the room more than words ever could. The speeches ended shortly afterward. The music came back on. The reception continued. But the atmosphere never recovered. People were whispering. Questions were spreading. And Ryan couldn't stop them. Emma thought the drama was over. It wasn't. Because about 10 minutes later, she made a decision she hadn't planned on making. She stood up. Not to create a scene, not to embarrass anyone, just to say one thing before leaving. One sentence. One sentence that made half the room turn toward Kate. And according to Emma, it hit harder than everything that came before. After she said it, she picked up her things and walked straight out of the reception. When Emma called me later that night, she was sitting in her car outside the venue. I could hear crickets in the background. "You actually stood up?" I asked. "I did." I laughed. My sister hated public speaking. She once avoided giving a toast at our cousin's wedding by pretending she had lost her voice. "What did you say?" There was a short pause. Then she answered. I looked at Kate and said, "My brother gave you 8 years. Let's hope this one lasts longer than 3 months." I leaned back in my chair. Simple. Direct. No screaming. No insults. Just the truth. "What happened after that?" I asked. "Nothing." "What do you mean?" I grabbed my bag and left. That was Emma. She wasn't interested in arguments. She said what she came to say and walked away. The real damage happened afterward. Over the next few weeks, people started talking, not because of Emma, not even because of Lauren. Because once questions started, more answers followed. A former client came forward saying Ryan had tried flirting with her during a consulting project. Then another story surfaced. Then another. Nothing explosive by itself. But together they painted a picture. Ryan wasn't the man people thought he was. He was a guy who constantly blurred lines whenever it benefited him. Word travels fast in business circles, especially hospitality. Within 2 months, several contracts disappeared. Then more. Then Kate started hearing things she didn't like. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after the wedding, Emma called me. "You won't believe this." "What now?" "Kate moved out." That got my attention. "What happened?" "Nobody knows the full story." I had a feeling I knew enough. Trust is expensive. Once it's broken, everything else becomes harder. Apparently there were arguments, money problems, questions about old relationships, questions about new relationships, the same things that had followed Ryan for years. The difference was that now Kate was on the receiving end of them. The woman who left me for Ryan was finally discovering the man she had actually married. And from what Emma was hearing, she didn't like what she found. A few weeks later, something happened that surprised me. Kate called me for the first time in nearly 2 years. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved anymore, but I recognized it immediately. Some numbers stick in your memory whether you want them to or not. I let it ring twice. Then I picked up. "Hello?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Kate said, "Hi, Larry." Her voice sounded different, less confident, older somehow. "What do you need?" I asked. Straight to the point. No reason to pretend. She let out a small breath. "I heard you're doing well." "I am." "Emma said you got promoted." "She talks too much." That got a small laugh out of her. Then silence again. Finally, she said it. "Ryan and I are getting divorced." I wasn't surprised, not even a little. "Okay, just one word. Nothing else." Kate was quiet for a few seconds. I think she expected more. Maybe sympathy, maybe satisfaction, maybe anger. She got none of them. "That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say?" Another pause. Then she asked the real question. "Do you ever think about what happened?" I looked out the window of my house. The sun was setting behind the fence line. A project manager had called earlier offering me another major contract. My life was full, peaceful, productive. The past didn't visit very often anymore. "Not really," I said. The honesty seemed to sting more than if I'd insulted her. "I made a mistake, Larry." "Several, probably." She didn't argue, because she knew it was true. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "I thought you'd fight for me." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "Kate, a man fights for a marriage when both people are protecting it." Neither of us spoke. After a while, she quietly said, "I understand that now." Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. We ended the call a few minutes later. No dramatic goodbye. No promises to stay in touch. Just two people whose lives had gone in different directions. 8 months later, Emma sent me a photo. Kate was walking out of the courthouse carrying divorce papers. Marriage number 2 was officially over. I looked at the picture for about 5 seconds. Then I deleted it. Not because I was angry, because I didn't need it. Years earlier, Kate had believed I wouldn't move forward without her. That was the funny part. The day she walked away was the day my life started moving in the right direction. I put my phone down and went back to work. And for the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to look back at. Thank you for watching.